The Carson River means everything to the Washoe people. Water is life. As soon as we're born, we get put in our baskets that are already waiting for us when we're, brand new babies. That's the way my family was anyway. We put the babies in the baskets right away. They've just always been in my life, always. My mom really was my teacher. If we came upon water anywhere in the mountains or wherever, she would stop and pray. Everybody had to stop and pray with her. So that was her thing, because she always told me water is life and we have to pray. That was the great thing about our native lives. When I was young, we took our kids everywhere with them. They round all the grandchildren up and, and we'd all head out to the hills and, go and pick pine nuts or whatever it is we need to do. That's how I got to learn the harvesting of the willow. You have to go out a certain time of year. You have to find the good willow. That's going to make the beautiful baskets. My mom we would just go to her house and she would show me how to split. That was the hardest thing, splitting a willow into 3 sections to make our threads. It took me a full year to learn how to split willows well, to really be confident with it. So, and really there's not a lot of people that can do it, even basket weavers. So that's the one thing that I was determined I would learn. The first basket that I started was a bickus, which is a baby basket, a Washoe baby basket. I think the baby basket was our most important basket, of course. And in the very beginning, years and years ago, they actually made 2 to 3 baskets per baby. They made a small, they called it a boat basket, that the baby would lay in for a few weeks. And then when it grew a little more, then they would put them in the regular baby basket called a bickus. And they stayed in that for several months until actually they started walking. And sometimes they made an even a larger basket because the babies loved their baskets. When right after they're born, they put them in the basket to sleep. And they loved it. They would tie them down, their arms, and strap them in. They would travel with the baby. Of course, when they didn't have cars, they walked everywhere, and they would have the leather strap across their shoulders and carry the baby everywhere with them. And when I had my children, I had 3 children, and they were all in a basket, and you could prop them up on the sofa, and they could watch you doing whatever you're doing. They're so safe because they take their naps in the basket. They can't roll off. They can't kick their covers off. They're just so comfortable, and they sleep so great in them. I don't think I met a baby yet that didn't love the basket. So, well, my grandmother, Sadie Jo Smokey, who was also in Dresslerville, raised in Dresslerville, and her husband was Willie, my grandfather. But of course, we didn't have cars way back then, or my grandparents didn't. So they actually walked what the old Kingsbury Grade, the Kingsbury Grade is now, was originally a Washoe Trail. And they used to hike that up to Tahoe. And then they would also have to walk to Placerville to get their acorn in the fall. And that was one of their main foods. So it's something that they did. And it was a long trip, of course, and they filled their burden baskets with the acorn in the Placerville area, and they came back, they carried them back, these big heavy baskets, and walked back. The burden basket was a large basket. They used them, of course, for the pine nuts and the acorn for carrying things, but we also moved around a lot, and they used this for their belongings. They would put their belongings in them and carry them. I can remember the men always taking the burden baskets when the families would go to pick pine nuts, and we would camp up in the pine nut hills for, days and weeks at a time, collecting our pine nuts in the fall. The men would always put the burden baskets over their shoulders with, the leather straps, and would climb. They would build their own ladders and climb to the tops of the trees, because that's where the biggest pine nuts were, the big cones, and so that's where they wanted to go. And they would get up there and they would collect the pine nuts, and fill the burden baskets with them. And they'd come back, and then moms and grandmas would be on the ground waiting for them, and they would pour their pine nuts, and then they would work on the pine nuts, so usually hitting them with sticks and knocking the pine nuts out of the shell. My grandma used to make she had 10 children, so she used to make burden baskets for each child in the family, and so they all had their own little burden baskets they collected their own nuts with, so they were an important part of the collection also. And that we used to do in the fall, and that was very important. I love that. Well, the winnowing tray is a very important basket. It was used for our cleaning and cooking. The cleaning tray was a basket that was actually made with space in between them and between the willow when you made them, so that the debris could fall through them when you were cleaning them. We went out, of course, we'd go out to the hills and we'd get our pine nuts and picking them off the ground. They were always dirty. They always had, the pine needles and the rocks and things on them. And so we always had to clean them real well. The cleaning tray, when we put the nuts in, a lot of the debris would fall through, but a lot of it would also come to the top when you did the winnowing motion with it. So, and that would just be brushed off by the person that was doing it, of course. And that's the way we cleaned our pine nuts. The next basket was the cooking tray. They had a pretty deep cooking basket, and they would build a hot fire, and then they would put the nuts in, put the hot charcoal in, and they would learn to move it so that the nuts could cook while the charcoal is, moving around them. And so that probably took about a half an hour to cook the nuts. And then one thing I found out from my aunt later was that they took the shells off of that when they first did that, and then they cooked them again with the charcoal, and that gave it a different flavor. That gave it a wonderful flavor that the Washoes loved. So they actually cooked it twice for the pine nut soup. The third thing we did was make the nuts into flour. The children would grind the pine nuts into flour. My grandmother, they lived on the reservation, and we had a big grinding rock in her backyard with lots of grinding holes in it, and all the grandchildren would sit around in a circle and we would grind our nuts. We would grind, and then we'd put them in the winnowing tray and move them, do that movement with them, and all the lumps would come to the top. And of course, we had to redo the lumps because you didn't want lumps in your soup. So we had to always continue grinding until we got a really nice flour for our pine nut soup. And that's how we did up with our grinding rocks and our winnowing trays. So those were the three things that we used the winnowing trays for, 3 different ones. The round baskets were, a lot of them were gift baskets, and people would give them as gifts. And my grandmother made me a round basket one year, and when I was probably around 6 years old. And she gave it to me for my birthday, and she filled it with candy. So it was so special to me, and I still have that basket, and it's still in the same condition that she gave it to me 70 years ago. So I love that basket, and it's just so important. And the baskets will last if you just take care of them. The baskets have been in our lives for thousands of years. Our baskets were our survival. We, collected our food with them. We cooked. We took care of our babies in them. We traveled with them. We did everything with our baskets. And it truly was our survival. It's so important to carry this on. I'm teaching my grandchildren how to make baskets, and they love it. They realize how much work it is, and I understand why the baskets are declining, because it is a lot of work, and you have to decide in your heart that this is something you really want to do, that you really want to teach your people, that you want to carry it on, and it has to be so important. That's the way I felt when I started making baskets. My mother wanted me to do this, and I wanted to honor my mother and my grandmothers. I thank my ancestors for showing me and for teaching me the Washoe way and for allowing me to grow up this way in our heritage and our culture and just how important it all is. I just thank them for that.